Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Asher Marketing Podcast. I'm Anthony Giuliano, and my guest is Connie Heflin. Connie, how you doing?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for doing this. I understand that you and I have something in common, and that is an adult child graduating from college.
Right.
So yours is at IU Bloomington?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so tell me what things look like going into May. How's he doing? Where's he going to land? Any insight on all of that?
Right. He's doing really well. I think he wants to move back to Fort Wayne. He loves Fort Wayne, and he wants to move back here. So he's really focusing his job search here in the Fort Wayne area. So we're excited about that.
Yeah.
So, fingers crossed he doesn't, he's interviewing actually today. So fingers crossed that it's going well.
All right. Well, hopefully by the time this sees the light of day, he will be settled into a new job.
Yeah.
I just got back. My son is not moving to Fort Wayne. He's moving to Charlotte, North Carolina.
Oh, great.
Growing up, his mom and I always told him, there's nothing wrong with where you grew up, but when you're young, see the world.
Yeah.
And he apparently took our advice. So
That's awesome.
Kind of sad about that, but
Right.
it'll be good for him. And
a great place to visit.
Correct. And maybe someday he will come back home.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're not here to talk about our kids. We're here to talk about you. So, Connie, we always start by talking about our guest's career path. So you grew up in Iowa.
Yep.
When you were growing up in Iowa, what were you thinking about in terms of careers? And where did you go from there? Did you stay on that path? Did you pivot from that path? What did that look like?
Right. Well, I did. I grew up on a farm in small town Iowa, in Eldridge, Iowa. Mm-hmm. And like every interview, they say you shouldn't talk about way back, but I really do feel that growing up in Iowa on a farm really kind of molded me into the person I am and set me on the career path. My dad was a really hard worker, a farmer, and there was no sitting around with my dad. And my parents didn't give us allowance, but we sold sweet corn. My brother and I would sell sweet corn every summer as kids, little kids.
So this is just roadside stand.
Yeah, we lived on 10 acres and we set up our stand at the end of the driveway, but we'd have to get up, in the dark. My parents would help us pick the sweet corn.
Yeah.
But my brother and I, he's 2 years younger, we would be responsible for selling the sweet corn. And then that was our allowance, the money that we raised off of this. Week of work was our yearly allowance. And my dad was, they were right there to help us, but it was all about giving the customer more than they expected. It was always a baker's dozen. It wasn't just 12 ears of corn in a dozen. It was 13. The corn was picked same day. And if you didn't sell it at the end of the day, you threw it away, and it always had to be fresh. And my dad really prided himself on having the best quality product, and for my brother and I, Brian, to give the best customer service. So, I mean, that started when we were like 8 years old.
Yeah.
And it was like, and you're getting up and you're doing this, guys. We had no option. And so that growing up in Iowa and that hard work ethic and that customer service, and it really did impact just kind of how I see things looking back. Being 54 years old, I still go back to customer service, and are we delivering the best customer service?
Yeah, well, that's great. And those are pretty simple but important lessons to learn.
Yeah, so simple.
Yeah. So, and you were actually a marketing major in college, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the Marketing Podcast.
Right.
Why did you choose marketing? What was appealing about that to you?
Well, it was that whole selling something too. I learned from that simple task of selling sweet corn that I like to sell. I like to talk to people. I like to have the best product, and I liked earning money. I mean, it was no big deal. This is back in the 80s, and my brother and I, each a piece, would walk away with $2,000 a piece.
Yeah,
so it wasn't, I liked money.
And that's
too.
for a week's
For a week's work.
Yeah, that's not bad.
Yeah, it wasn't bad.
Yeah.
So it was a pretty good gig. And so it led me down that path of marketing. And I guess I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my marketing major with that degree. But I also was on the Disney College program, and I worked at Disney World and that really kind of formed my opinion on customer service too. That whole, the Disney World of everything, their brand. So, graduating, just like Jack's in that position, right now, I didn't know, but I took a sales job with Lipton Tea and Soup. I went into sales rather than marketing as you might see it. But I, in my brain, see sales and marketing as something very interchangeable.
Yeah, for sure.
It's all the same.
For sure. All right. So you work for Lipton out of school, and then eventually you found your way to Indiana.
Yeah.
Was that shortly after school, or was it much later?
It wasn't that much later. So I was the sales rep for Lipton Tea and Soup, and then got married, moved back to the Quad Cities, and took a different sales job selling steel case office furniture. Then we relocated to Fort Wayne, and in between there, I had started our own retail business. It's kind of a convoluted story, but instead of selling and working around the clock selling office furniture, we opened a residential furniture company. And so moved to Fort Wayne. I was still part owner in that business. And that's going back to 1990. So, yeah.
All right. So the furniture business was in Quad Cities? Okay. All right. So you then moved to Fort Wayne. You've got one foot in a retail business in Iowa. You're here. And is that when you start the fundraising part of your career, or does that come later?
No, that definitely started. And then there's, I moved to Fort Wayne, and we transferred here for my husband's job with General Electric, and moved here not knowing a soul. So that's really when volunteering became a part of my life. And that's how I kind of got to know people in Fort Wayne, was through volunteer and worked or volunteered for the Junior League. It was a women's nonprofit group that I volunteered for and really got involved with. And that's how I made friends through this volunteer work. And that's how I got involved. So did that, and that led to, as my husband put it, the residential furniture business that we were still part owners in, and we'd go back and forth. It was more of an expensive hobby than maybe for yourself. Anyway, then I took the fundraising kind of, and which is sales too, is that marketing thing with IPFW with the Tapestry event. So
for those who aren't familiar, what was the Tapestry event?
Tapestry was a one-day event at the Coliseum put on by IPFW in Parkview. And we'd bring in a great big guest speaker, and it was a day for women. And so keynote speaker, breakout sessions, and then there were sponsors for the event. And so I was responsible for the sponsors that attended and had booths at the event or sponsored a breakout session and so on. So I did the sponsorship for Tapestry.
Okay, so drawn on your sales background there. Yeah. Okay. And then from that role with what was then IPFW, where do you go from there, and why do you make a change?
Oh, I did that for about 7 years, and that was part-time. So Jack and now Nate were small and young, and that I was working part-time, and I took a job with Early Childhood Alliance as a fundraiser for ECA. And that was more of it was still 20 hours a week, but it was every week, all year round. Tapestry was very seasonal. I didn't have to work in the summers. And so I did that with Early Childhood Alliance. And then after 3 years with them, I took a very quick stint at Canterbury in their fundraising department. And then I was only there for 6 months. And this job where I am now, I'm the executive director for SuperShot. The job opportunity came around, and I said, no, I can't interview. I just took this job with Canterbury. Now is not the time to make a career move. I can't do that. Well, and the connections through that were through the volunteer work that I'd done way back with Junior League. So it was that whole full circle of when you give, you always get more than you give in this world. And so it was through my connections through Junior League that the job with SuperShot was introduced to me. And they said, well, just talk to us, just sit down. And well, so here we are.
So you were on the receiving end of a sales pitch this time.
And so I took the job. I felt terrible because I, hadn't been at Canterbury very long. But I stepped up, and it was full time. It's obviously it's executive director, full time job, and I was just ready. The kids were older, and I just was ready to take on the next big thing, the next challenge. And SuperShot, I through my volunteer work and working at Early Childhood, I really love the nonprofit sector. I really feel that there's a lot of good work that has to be done in the nonprofit world, just as it would in a for-profit business. And if you can bring some of that to it, you can move the agencies forward considerably.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about SuperShot.
Yeah.
Tell me how you describe the organization. You're obviously very familiar with it, but for someone who might not know much about SuperShot, what does the organization do?
So we're a Fort Wayne-based nonprofit that provides immunizations primarily to children, regardless of their ability to pay. So we're the second largest pediatric provider of federal vaccines to children in the state of Indiana. And we have 4 different clinic locations. We do a lot of community outreach, and we really try to advocate and educate parents on the importance of immunizations.
And you have a small but mighty team of staff and volunteers. Talk a little bit about the team you work with, if you don't mind.
So we're, like you said, a small but mighty team. There's 7 of us that are full-time. We're very seasonal. Back to school and flu season is a really big season for us. So at any given time, during that time, we can go up to a little over 20 employees. But those are seasonal part-time employees. But it's a small but mighty team. We've been given a permanent home. We now have a clinic location. So SuperShots, it's a nonprofit that's been around for 30 years. This is our 30th anniversary. And the model has always been to work out of donated clinic spaces. And again, going back to this marketing and the branding, that's a great model for the budget. But it's really hard for people to understand where you're going to be, especially when you're given space and when that space is needed for something else. You just pack up your tote and beggars can't be choosers.
For sure.
So, we really needed to look at the model at SuperShot and figure out, how do we provide this service? And we're a walk-in clinic only. And, you would look at it. I came into it and families would wait 3 hours to get their child vaccinated in a crazy waiting room. That I'd be like, I'm not quite sure if I'd want to bring my kids here. So it's going back to my dad's, are you giving the best product, the best customer service? So it's really been a time at SuperShot where even though we're 30 years old, we're really in a innovation and growth mode in the life cycle. We've come kind of back to, a startup. I almost consider us being at a startup location point in our agency's, life cycle right now. So what do you do in a case where you have a parent who's been waiting a long time, which is necessary? It's a walk-in proposition. It's something their kids need, so they can't just walk away and hope they'll get, served more quickly. How do you respond to that from a customer service standpoint? Well, we've taken a really big step. We take appointments now. So we have changed our model. We really try to empower the parent to understand what the wait time is and let them make the decisions now. So our appointments get precedent. We try to keep those on schedule. If they're not on schedule, we apologize. Try to make sure they understand the why behind it, so they're just not sitting there waiting and wondering. And then if you're a walk-in patient, we really try to explain, okay, we will be happy to see you today, but this is where the current wait is. So they can be, and we'll happily see you today, or if you want to make an appointment, we can get you in 15 minutes.
So put them back in control of their own destiny, so to speak. All right. Well, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you this question. It's probably the toughest question I'm going to ask you. Although you and I have talked about this before, so maybe it's not all that tough. You're doing this work at a time when vaccinations have unfortunately become controversial and politicized. Easy question to ask, hard question to answer. How are you navigating that over the past few years? What are you doing to encourage people to still seek vaccination out? What are you doing, if anything, to offset some of the negatives we're hearing and some of the misinformation that's out there? Pretty big part of your job, I would imagine. What are you doing with that?
Well, I mean, on a fundamental point, just personally, I had to get a bit thicker skin. I didn't think at the onset of this, stepping into the role at SuperShot, that I would be in a place where people didn't think the work that we were doing is good work.
Yeah.
That just wasn't even a thought in my mind. Yep. And I still, I don't doubt what we're doing for a second that it's good work.
Yep.
And then immunizations are the best tool that we have for public health to keep our communities healthy. And it's so important for kids to get their routine immunizations. But COVID has even created hesitancy just in routine immunizations. It's crept that far. So I guess I had to get thicker skin and just say everybody's going to have a view on this.
Yep.
And if I know in my heart that I'm doing the right thing, that I'm going to land, when this is all said and done, on the right side of history, that we're protecting people, we're keeping them out of the hospital, then I can live with that.
Yep.
I can live with that. The next step was, give people the facts. If they don't want it, we're not going to go at them and argue. We're not going to start the argument. Yep. We're not going to be that person. Yeah. But empower people with facts and the information. Yeah. And if they make that decision, that's fine. It's not fine. It's not, but it's their decision to make that.
Controlling what you can control.
Yeah.
Well, and it's unfortunate because the viability of immunization over the years has made us take it for granted. It's one of those things
I mean, that's, vaccines are their own worst enemy. We don't see polio because they're working. Yep. So we have this generational where there's a generation that hasn't seen really severe disease. So we if it's out of sight, out of mind, you don't think about it. You don't consider it a risk, and it's because the vaccines are working.
Yeah. So you've got a nonprofit budget, which is it's good enough to get the job done, but it's not exorbitant. You've got a time during the pandemic when you've got major demand for your services. You're also trying to run a business like everyone else remotely and with new rules and all these other things. How did you navigate all that and still do the other important work that you were doing? How did you pivot, get the message out, keep the opportunity in front of people while also doing all the other important things you needed to do? Right.
Well, it goes back to being a small but mighty team. It was acknowledging to the team that this is hard. I get that we're all in this situation that's hard. Before the pandemic hit, that's when we were walk-in only. And within a day, we had to shift to appointments. And we didn't have anything in place to do that. And so, and it's giving each other grace and saying, we're not going to know exactly. We are building the plane while we're flying it right now. We are not going to have the perfect solution, but we're just going to keep trying. So I guess that was our attitude of just complete flexibility and to stay calm, carry on. Nothing, we're going to be.
So had you planned to introduce appointments, or was that kind of a byproduct of the pandemic, something that was pushed forward?
It was pushed forward. It was on the radar because we could clearly see that a 3-hour wait in the waiting room was miserable. Sure. And our mission is to break down the barriers of access and affordability. We're creating our own barrier of access there. Nobody wanted to do that. So it was on the radar that we need to figure out how to move, but it was just accelerated. That's some of the best things that came out of COVID was, there's no time to wait. We're figuring this out today.
Well, and I've heard it described as 10 years of innovation in 3 months because of all the changes. I was teaching at 2 local universities around that time, and everybody really got good at online learning all of a sudden, or learned where the knowledge gaps were for the same reason. It was kind of like this thing that was off in the distance was now there in front of you. So let's talk now about some of the things that are on your plate currently. Obviously, that was a big part of your job. You're still dealing with some of the byproducts of the last couple of years. But what are some of the things you're looking forward to that you're working on, big items on your to-do list, things that are super important to the organization or to you personally that you're trying to move forward?
Yeah, it's super short. Like you said, we have a limited budget. We're a nonprofit. We're doing work that is not profitable. So we're trying to figure out other revenue streams to help offset our nonprofit work. So we are now partnering with schools where we go into the schools and we provide immunizations in the schools. And that program really pushed us to accept commercial insurance and not only public insurance.
Okay.
So now we're really trying to work on how do we again, customer service. How we're really working on appointment scheduling and empowering patients and making it as easy as possible using technology. We have a new clinic location, and we want that clinic to feel like the best home for anybody, no matter what your insurance rate, if you have commercial insurance, public insurance, or no insurance at all, that you would walk into SuperShot and feel like this is a place where you're getting great care, and it didn't matter what your income level was. So we're really working on that, and we're really trying to, again, like I said, diversify our revenue stream, where how can we fill all the appointment slots and help commercial insured patients offset our nonprofit work. Because, I mean, doctor's office, we talk to them all. We're partners with them all. Yeah. There's not a lot of money in vaccines, no matter which insurance you have. So if we can really work to fill all of the appointments and really reach out in the community to figure out the best ways to do that, then that helps our revenue and our bottom line. So that's our biggest, is really trying to figure out, and branding. It's a branding. And not everybody will go, I didn't know you took commercial insurance, and we serve adults now, so it's really, again, that innovation startup phase where we really have to get the agency in the public eye and for everybody in the community to know that we can serve everyone now.
So in the past, you were relying fully on borrowed space?
Yep.
Borrowed clinic space. So now this is a first for the organization that you have your own clinic. Where's the clinic located?
It's out on 1515 Hobson Road. It was a Parkview walk-in clinic out there, and it has 15 private exam rooms, and we're remodeling each. There's a north side and a south side that it mirrors each other with exam rooms. So it's going to have all new family exam rooms, new nurses station, ADA and family restrooms, new flooring. It was a nice facility, but the carpeting, carpeting had been around for 20 plus years. And for us, when kids get their vaccines, sometimes they get nervous, and cleaning things off of old carpet is really gross. So now we're going to have hard surface floors, and, so it's just where we can brand the agency there too, with interior signage, exterior signage, and really be a place of confidence to come and get your family's immunizations.
So you're learning all kinds of new skills.
All kinds, always.
All right. That sounds like enough of a job in itself, opening the new clinic. Is there anything else that's big on your to-do list that's important to you, other work that you're focused on?
It sounds so simple, but it's delivering the best product. It's keeping appointments on time, letting parents, getting parents in a quick turnaround. When you're coming to SuperShot, you normally, like every parent, we wait to the last minute to get our school physical or to get the vaccines that they're required to have. So making sure there's appointments in a relatively quick turnaround, in that week's turnaround. But it's really optimizing our internal, I want to say, scheduling efficiencies, and then doing a lot more community outreach to impact our immunization rates, to improve them. And then again, partnering with healthcare systems to get their patients that they can't see, to get them scheduled to SuperShot. So it's driving volume, as well as providing a really good product and experience.
So a lot of moving parts.
Yeah. But it's fun, right? It's a challenge.
Well, it sounds like very fulfilling work at the end of the day, even if it's more challenging than selling Lipton tea.
Right. Or sweet corn, right?
Right. All right. Well, I want to pivot to some of the more quick hit questions that I wanted to ask. And let's start with career advice. You've dealt with some challenging stuff. You have learned quite a bit in a short amount of time, including in the last couple of years, but also over the course of your career. What's some of the best advice you have in terms of building a successful, fulfilling career?
I think it's surrounding yourself with experts in the field. You can learn so much And like, let's say, for instance, right now, the Super Shot board, I learn daily from our board members. And it's always, or going back to my junior league experience when I was the president of junior league and I was trying to figure out who my sustainer advisor would be, and I went for her. I went for somebody who was the president of all the junior leagues. So go big with the people that surround you, because you don't have to be. You don't have to be the smartest person in the room, and don't be afraid not to be the smartest person in the room, because you can just learn so much with surrounding yourself with people that are best of what they do.
Yep. And if you don't ask, the answer is always no. So why not ask for the best person? And they say no, move on to the next.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's really good advice. This one might be a really easy question for you, or it might be difficult. What is a myth or misconception related to your work that you'd like to clear up, or something that isn't well enough understood that you'd like to amplify?
Well, I go back to that. We can accept all insurance at Super Shot. So Super Shot used to be, you can only if you had Medicaid, uninsured or underinsured, and mainly for children. But we can see anybody in the community now if you need your immunizations, from birth to death, to any and all or no insurance plans.
Okay. So if somebody needs to get an immunization and they want to schedule an appointment, go to your website. Is that the best place for them to do that?
Yeah, go to our website and our phone number's on there, and they can call. And soon we'll have a live chat where they can text, like on the computer, they can text with a scheduler right there and go back and forth.
Okay, quick digression.
Yeah.
And if you can't, if this is proprietary or it's not something you can answer, feel free to tell me that. But are those schedulers contracted? Are they your employees? How does all that work?
We have one person.
Okay.
Her name's Mary, who works on the phones, but we are working through a scheduling app and company called Health iPass.
Okay.
And it's also now that we're working with all these schools, we go out into the schools during flu season and provide over 8,000 kids a flu vaccine, and all that consent has been on paper, and Health iPass can help us.
Oh, that's great.
Give a link to parents where they can register for that in-school flu shot through a link rather than a piece of paper that we're shuffling in between nurses and Super Shot.
All right.
And then on our end, we're uploading it all, and it's all through a new company called Health iPass. They're out of Chicago.
Okay. And Mary is supplementing that.
Yes.
Okay. So the fact that you have Health iPass is good for parents, it's good for Super Shot, and it's good for Mary because she doesn't have to do all that work.
Right.
Well, good.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
All right. Last question has to do with how you get your work done. And I've gotten a wide variety of answers to this question, but what is a tool, a trick, a tip, a hack, something that you use that kind of saves your day every day, that maybe you even take for granted, but that other people should know about? Something that helps you get the job done.
Oh, brother. When I was looking at that, a tool or trick, and maybe this isn't every day, but know when to call in the expert.
Yeah.
So, I mean, as the ED of a small nonprofit, I'm the executive director, but I'm also all the marketing person. I'm our social media person. I'm our web, but I called you, the expert, when we needed to totally revamp our website.
Yeah.
Or if we're looking at all new signage and telling the Super Shot story and the branding our new building, know when to call in the expert. That's, I guess, maybe the tip. You can't do it all.
Yeah.
And I really believe in nonprofit world, budget's always a concern, but you really have to understand that this is your marketing, your image, your brand is something that you need to invest in.
Sure. Well, thanks for calling us, by the way.
Yeah.
And you
guys are awesome.
I'll second that, especially when you have a small but mighty team, which seems to be a theme of this conversation. Any time you spend on the things that are outside your area of expertise or outside your area of responsibility is time taken away from really important stuff. Not to state the obvious, but you're doing really important work, and there's probably better ways to spend your time. Sometimes the best way to spend your time is pick up the phone, call someone who can do it faster.
Expert. Right.
Yeah. And I think that's good advice. Not often. It's something I think most people understand, but they don't usually act on it. because especially, you know, a lot of leaders have a bias towards, well, I'm just going to do it myself.
Oh, right.
So, you know, that's something hopefully that others will hear and listen to, because regardless of what business you're in, there are things that are better outsourced, or, you know, sometimes it's hired. Sometimes it's worth hiring someone part-time or full-time to do the work in-house. Sometimes it's a specialty agency, but you can't do it all for sure.
You can't do it all, and you can't, especially if you're that leader that thinks we're human, and it can't be a genius and the rock star at absolutely everything. I mean, it's even with your staff. I mean, let the clinical staff do the clinical thing.
Yeah.
I mean, they're the experts. They're the RNs. They're the masters in public health. Let them focus. Let your team focus on what they're great at.
Yeah, and it doesn't diminish your expertise to let someone use their expertise.
No, yeah, and it makes it lifts. The rising tide lifts all ships. You know, the better everybody else is, the better the whole agency is.
Yeah.
So I really, I don't know if that's something, a great, every day in your life tip, but I really think you need to really think about it, between budget constraints or whatever. When do you hire the expert, or when do you need to call in the expert? Yeah,
I think it does apply to the everyday. There's stuff that we do at home that we hate doing, we don't do it well, and we persist in doing it ourselves.
Yeah.
Where, I found out one day there was a really nice summer day, and I was inside ironing shirts, which I hate doing. And it dawned on me, I was like, Peerless Cleaners will pick these up, and for about $2 a shirt, we'll make them look better than I ever could. So there's a little plug unintentional plug for Peerless Cleaners. But yeah, I mean, and that's magnified in a work setting where, things are more complicated than ironing shirts.
Right.
So yeah. All right. Well, there you have it. Our advice is, send your shirts to the dry cleaner. Don't do it yourself.
Don't do everything yourself.
Yeah. Well, Connie, thanks for doing this, and thanks for the important work you do at SuperShot. We appreciate the opportunity to be a very small part of it, and thanks for everything you do.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, and thank you for your partnership and being the expert that we can call on.
Well, thanks. And thanks to everyone who took the opportunity to listen to this episode of the Asher Marketing Podcast. We'll be back next time with another great guest, and we hope you'll join us then.